Okay, so Outlast came out during the release of PlayStation 4. So technically, it's an older game. However, there are a lot of horror games that came before that did way better than Outlast 1. So when people played Outlast for the first time, and when people played Outlast thereafter, everyone was kind of riding the bandwagon, right? Everyone hopped in the bandwagon. Because what happened is, to garner views and to get the most out of the game, people forced themselves and convinced themselves to be afraid of the game, to have horror, right? It's a shallow horror, actually. It's not scary at all. It's just that they forced themselves. Now, recall that when you're doing a psychological horror, which is Outlast pretended to be a psychological horror when it's not. It's not a psychological horror, Outlast 1, because the definition of psychological horror was made solid by Silent Hill 2, which is the gold standard for horror games. Manifestations of any creature or monster should be derived from the id or the subconscious of whoever's playing the game. It could either be you or the protagonist. So, for example, James Sunderland has sexual frustrations on and was placed on an area wherein all the id or the subconscious elements manifest as grotesque figures to punish James Sunderland. So, since James has a wife who has cancer, this isn't a spoiler, but since James has a wife who has cancer, he cannot perform intercourse. So, technically, most of the enemies in Silent Hill 2 would be females, except Pyramid Head, which is James with just a pyramid head, right? So they would have mannequins who are not mannequins, but their two legs are connected to each other, and they have seizures, right? Such as brain tumors. So anyway, the way the manifestations hold true when it comes to Silent Hill is that they really um, they really get into the subconscious disgust, wherein the uncanny valley sets in. You know there's something uncomfortable and disturbing about that. That's why it's very scary. Along with the the environmental details and the psychological effect it brings with the rust, the uncanny valley situation. The areas don't seem right, even though they should be. That's what you call true horror. Outlast One is a shallow horror in terms of psychologies because, or in terms of psychiatric problems, because it's an asylum with crazy people. That's the shallowness of the psychological horror. There's nothing in the game that shows psychological horror except darkness, which is a natural fear of humans due to our ancestors' dread of whatever's lurking in the darkness. And then the other thing that seems to scare people are the jump scares. The real name of jump scares is um, surprise. Surprise is a natural instinct in the defense mechanism of human beings in order to defend themselves against predators. So when you combine those two, you get the most shallow horror in Outlast 1. Now, I guess Outlast is more jump scares and gore. I feel like that's their scare factor plus the darkness. Here's the thing too. Remember, remember that's true. That's true. They depended on gore, quote unquote. However, if a medical expert who has been through the rough patches and the horrors of of medical traumas, they would be used to that. However, since people jumped on the bandwagon, everyone was quote unquote getting scared, right? So what happened was no one bothered to explore and or break the game because this is an indie studio. They don't have enough budget for either expertise or quality assurance. So the developers are banking on your uh we're banking on your fear or your horror. They're banking on you to just follow the script because Outlast is a movie. It's not a script. I'll get to that later. So it's a movie, not a game. So I guess that later. So the problem with Outlast is since everyone's doing exactly what the developers hoped they would do, no one bothered to break the game. How often does one person face the killer instead of running away from them? Because I'm insane. I'm crazy enough to see how they killed me. And did you know what I discovered? Because people are facing away from the enemy, they didn't bother to see what would the actions of the killers would be when you're facing them. Do you know what they look like when they're killing you with a machete? They go like this. They run, right? So they're robots. Once they hit you, they just stare at you. Then after 3 seconds, they hit. Because the developers are hoping that you would not face the killers because you're running away from them. Once you look at them and you see them attack, the illusion breaks because they're dolls that just go like this. They don't feel organic, which is fixed in Outlast 2. Because when we did that, we were laughing during the stream. It was so funny. Because they did not act the way they should act because we went off script. And the game broke. Another thing is that you know the non non-lethal, non-dangerous inmates. They approach you, right? For example, there was this guy who was in a straight jacket. There was blind. He was blind, and then he was chasing you, right? He was also new. He was just bumping you. Have you tried bumping the inmates back? They teleport once you push them. They teleport, and then they clip in the through the wall. They clip through the wall, and then they half of their bodies are exposed, half of their bodies are inside the wall or the pillar, which means the developers did not expect us to bump them and destroy the illusion. Yes, they just used tension and chase, really. And then here's the thing. I also experimented on. You know what? Let's just go to New York because that's where the missions are. Okay. Um, there's another thing. Remember that you use a camera, right? Here's the thing. I again stress test the game. When you say stress test, which is a normal thing in game development, when you stress test the game, you are not trying to break the game. You are going to break that game so that the developers before release will fix that error so that the players will not experience it. Obviously, the the developers did not have enough budget for that, so I broke the game itself. What I did was remember that when you're using the camera, the battery won't deplete while you're using it. However, when you do use night vision, that's when it depletes, which makes no sense because even back then when we used the camera, just by turning it on, the battery drains really fast. So what I did was, um, for example, my battery is 6 out of 10, right? I have 6 out of 10 batteries left, and the current battery I have has right around 75% left, right? At one point, I accidentally replaced the battery, even though the battery is not yet drained. So the 6 out of 10 batteries became 5 out of 10 batteries. The capacity of the current battery became 100%. Just the way reload works, right? What I wanted to do was reload the last checkpoint so I could load before I use the battery. So it goes back to 6 out of 10, right? And the battery returns to 75%. Because I don't want to waste my battery. When I loaded the game to the last checkpoint, the battery is still 5 out of 10. However, the battery, because I used the battery when it was 5 out of 10, it went to like 80%. I went back to the main menu, reloaded Outlast to the last checkpoint. The battery is still 5 out of 10. The developers did not, or could not, or did it on purpose. They did not factor in the checkpoint wherein they designed it so that the battery could be recovered. They did not do that. If you consume it, you consume it, regardless of the auto. It's an autosave thing, regardless if you want it back. So it's a cheat. If you consume your batteries accidentally, no matter what checkpoint you went back to, it's consumed. It's your loss. Too bad. That's poor design. So what I did was I noticed that whenever the battery goes to like 80%, I loaded back, right? It's still 5 out of 10, but it filled back up. So I did an experiment. I drained the battery all the way to 25%, but I'm still in checkpoint A. From checkpoint A, I checked to checkpoint B. I maintained that 25% battery left, and my battery is still 5 out of 10. I got to checkpoint B. I closed the game, I loaded up, and then I went to checkpoint B. Right? I was able to reach the checkpoint before I quit the game. But when I went back to the game, my battery is still 5 out of 10, but my battery fills back up to 100%. Exploit. Revenge against the developers. If they want to exploit against me to not recover my battery, I exploited them, wherein every time I quit and load, the battery fills up again. I played the game then from start to finish, never using a single battery to reload. The battery was infinite because every time I go to the next checkpoint, I just simply quit, load, and the battery fills up again. Because people kept the night vision on, because what I did with the night vision, I switched to on off on off on off on off on off. So it's like it's a flickering night vision camera, right? So that 50% of the time, I don't waste my night vision. Instead of just completely turning it on, it dreams fast. So because people kept the night vision on and they just reload as per what the developers wanted you to do, no one noticed that there is an exploit that was never patched because no one bothered to try. Because everyone was so busy trying to act scared in front of the camera, no one bothered to stress test the game. So the exploit carried over to Outlast 2, wherein I never used a battery to reload. Neither did I use a bandage ever, except during the time there were nails, right? Because whenever I quit and load, the battery and the bandit and my health fill back up. No one bothered to fix that exploit. And the problem is, no one even bothered to use it as well, even though it's very easy. You know how much the battery max in Outlast 2 is? Not a lot of people know because all their batteries are always almost gone. It's 8. My battery always stayed until 8 maximum and it never drained. It never drained. That's how poorly designed Outlast is. It's in my my videos are still in my Twitch channel. You can review it if you want. Another thing, there's no point in exploring because even if you go to other places, you are not rewarded for exploring. In fact, it's just a linear game. In fact, it's one of the most linear games I've ever played because it's literally a straight line. Well, it's no longer a straight line, it curves. It curves. The line curves around so that you think that you're exploring, but technically, even though it's a few floors up, it's another area, it's all a linear game. If you recall, 7 doors, only one is open. That's always the case. And if you try to do something that's not part of the script, you die. You go back, you die. You go front, you die. If you go beyond what the developers want you to do, and you do succeed in going off script, it's gonna go bug. It's gonna get buggy. It's gonna crash. And what do you call this? There, stealth does not exist, guys. Here's the thing. Okay, while I'm setting up my main mission here, so here is stealth. This is the definition of stealth. What makes Metal Gear Solid, Splinter Cell, and Siphon Filter amazing and gold standards for stealth games, while games like The Last of Us and Outlast are poor in terms of stealth game. The definition of stealth and video games in general is that when you develop a video game, you are challenging your players to find a solution to a problem. There should be multiple ways to do it. It doesn't. Not all the ways you do it are efficient. There's maybe only one or two. The rest are okay, and then there's poor way of doing it. However, you are presented with multiple ways to finish a single task. That includes stealth. When you're doing stealth as Solid Snake, when you're doing stealth as Sam Fisher or Gabriel Logan, if you make a mistake, you're given a chance um, to redo those mistakes. So you go back, right? You go back to to an alert, right? There's danger, and then there's caution, then it goes back to, right? And then you try it again and again. And if you stay stealth, you stay stealth. You don't get out of stealth. You won't be seen. That's the problem with Outlast 1. If the developers want you to be seen, you will be seen. No matter how good you are at stealth, which is, I tried to do a perfect stealth, like a stealth game. It failed. You know why? Because the developers didn't know how to develop the game, wherein if you do a perfect stealth, you won't be seen by enemies, and then the scenes won't trigger. Like for example, in Whistleblower, the groom, right, the one trying to make guys into girls. No matter what you do, he will always see you because the next scene after that is him grabbing you and putting you up the ceiling. If you remember correctly, you will never get out of that scene, and he will always find you. Stealth is non existent because there's no way around whatever it is you're trying to avoid. That is the principle of stealth, which Outlast does not have. Give me one scene in Outlast wherein you do stealth and you stay stealth throughout the game. Right? I actually saw that in Outlast 2, I think, where players try to stealth but the lady still finds you. Correct. Because the game is not a game. Outlast 1 and 2 are movies and you are an actor trying to follow the script. You break the game, it all falls. In fact, what I did was when I was chatting with my audience members, right? When I was chatting with them, what happened was I stayed in one place. It was dark. There was patrolling enemies outside. I was never scared because I was talking to my friends for a good 30 minutes and nothing happened because it was fully scripted. I knew I was not in danger because that's how predictable the game became. That's how poorly made Outlast 1 and 2 are. And the problem with Outlast 2 is because everyone showed the exact same reaction for Outlast 1, and not one of them, or almost none of them, broke the game. They carried over in Outlast 2, right? And the developers thought that, oh, this scene, they had good reaction. They were scared and blah 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 blah. Because they thought that was a good thing. In Outlast 2, everything became worse. There were fewer enemies because the jump scares got too many, right? So it became more boring. It became more linear. The uh, the punishments for staying off script were way worse in Outlast 2. So Outlast 1 was already a trial and error, right? Because there's only one solution. There's no problem, there's one solution. That's how bad it is. There's no problem and there's one solution. Do you know how effed up that is? So in Outlast 2, it's even way more linear. There's only one specific way, one specific action for one specific direction for you to do it right. Which means it became more of a trial and error. There was a pit wherein I didn't know I had to do a slide. Not a crawl, it's a slide to get through that area. How effed up is that? No one told me that I had to slide. I had to find that out through trial and error. That's how bad it is. Also, if you, um, the audience before, we stared at the models from Outlast One. It's more horrible than you remembered because no one tried to stare at them for too long because they were quote unquote too scared. Oh, we gotta run! So they turn around, right? We stared at the models. They were ugly AF. The only thing good about Outlast, there's only one: environmental detail. Not the music. The music is so cliche. It's the environmental detail. That's it. So if you go back to if you try to watch my video again, you'll see the errors of Outlast. I mean, I don't want to ruin it for people, but it doesn't deserve the 8.5 out of 10 that it got back in 2013 or 2014. It did not deserve that what do you call this? It did not deserve that score. Especially now that there are better games. I feel like the only reason why I'm scared of Atlas would be the darkness factor because it's something I hate in video games in general. You know, I was also quite annoyed that and scared of darkness back then. However, there was one video game that taught me not to be afraid of the darkness. You know what game that is? Splinter Cell Conviction. There was the scene with Sam Fisher and his daughter, right? He was tucking his daughter to bed, but the daughter was afraid of the dark, and he went to his dad, Sam. Sam brought his daughter back to bed, and you know what he told her? The first thing he did was he turned off the lights. The daughter was scared. Sam said, "It's always better to be in the dark. You have to love the darkness. Darkness is your greatest weapon." You know why? You know why the darkness is your greatest weapon? Why you should fall in love with darkness? Because when there are enemies around and they are against you, when you are in the light and they are in the dark, they see you and you cannot see them because your eyes are used to the light, not to the dark. However, if you're in the dark, you see everything. And if you see everything, you know what to do. But if you can't see anything, don't be afraid. They cannot see you too. You always win when you're in the darkness. And after that, I was like, well, fuck. So that's why when I played Outlast, I was always turning off the night vision. And I was always staying in the darkness. Because unless it's scripted, when you're in the darkness, none of the enemies can see you. I applied that. And I was heartbroken because it had to be scripted, so when they need to see you, they will see you, regardless of how good you are in stealth. My favorite Splinter Cell game is Conviction, and I loved it even more because of that. I was taught not to be afraid of the dark afterwards.
Agent, Black Tusk just arrived and scuttled a ferry with
And if you keep that in mind all the time, you'll find it surprising enough that you'll enjoy the darkness more than you fear it. Video games, man. Mwah. It's the masterpiece. Because if you that's amazing. We'll definitely remember that, right? It makes sense, even in real life. There are intruders in the house. Turn off the lights, man, because you know your house better than they do. So turn it off. They'll be blind, and you can sneak up on them. Darkness is your friend. So compare Outlast to games like... There are 3 games in mind. One of them I'm not as much afraid, but there are 3 games in mind you need to set as a gold standard for video game franchise. Resident Evil OG 1, 2, 3. That's 1. Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and then by extension 4, that's 2. And Fatal Frame, that's 3. Bear in mind how they do psychological horror with those games. Outlast is nothing compared to those. By the way, Outlast 2, poor story. I did not understand what happened. They even abandoned the morphogenic engine. Oh, by the way, um, one of the audience members back then was a nurse, and I'm a doctor, right? So we were talking about the notes in Outlast 1 and how they were because it's supposed to be a lab, it's supposed to be a hospital, medical terms, right? We were laughing because they were so inaccurate. They used a morphogenic engine which doesn't exist. They did not specify the hormone, the dosage, the frequency. They don't even explain why you would need spirometry with those kinds of things. There's no reason for them to have sputum production. So we were discussing the medical terms and like it was obvious they did not have enough budget to hire medical experts for consultation. So they did their own research. Even the names are so obvious. But it's a fun way to break. So whenever you're doing horror, it's nice to break down those games. Resident Evil 8 is out. We broke that down as well. It was well made. The Resident Evil 8 never got an update because it was done so well before release that they didn't need a patch to fix something because nothing was broken. But even if you try to break Resident Evil 8, you cannot because everything is paced so well. That's how you make horror game. There's another concept in terms of horror games that Outlast tried to manipulate, quote unquote, but Resident Evil, Fatal Frame, Silent Hill did so well. You know what that is? Audience members, if you're still listening, guys,
I'm still here, Agent. But we're running out of
Outlast 1
time.
and 2.
I'm on the remaining ferry.
Okay, let's focus on let's ignore Indonesia for now. Outlast 1 and 2 did not include weapons. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil series, Silent Hill, and what was the other one? Fatal Frame, all have weapons, right? Why are they scarier than Outlast? A weapon in real life, when held by a human being, gives number one, security and comfort, number two, power. Because we all know what a sword, a knife, or a gun does to a human being. We're mortals, it kills them, right? A weapon is the definition of power overwhelming. When you put it in the hands of people in Resident Evil, or Silent Hill, or in Fatal Frame, why are they still scary even though they have weapons? Because our enemies are not affected by whatever weapon we have. That power is taken away from us. And that security that we feel, that power that we feel, gone. That is horror. The feeling of helplessness even though you have all the capacity in the world to defend yourself. That is true horror. You are helpless. Outlast 1 and 2. The thing is, the developers did not, I think, have time or budget or skills to develop weapons well. So they made an excuse to like, oh, what makes it horror? No weapons, right? Because you can't defend yourself. That's scary. That's bullshit. They did not know how to develop the game well. To the point that in Outlast 2, we already have farming tools, pitchforks, shovels, steel pipes, and you still can't use them. Why? Because no, it's scary. You do not rationalize, and you should not rationalize for them, because it makes no sense. It's normal for human beings to defend themselves, right? The normal human response is to grab the nearest weapon and defend yourselves. No human would just allow themselves to die. For those who respect their life, right? They will not allow themselves to be killed so easily. They would run away. But if they have the chance or find a weapon, they will take it. Right? Even the inmates in Outlast 1 have the decency to hold a police baton. And you do not. You have arms. You have one free arm. Use it. If you take away the normal response of a human being to defend themselves and grab a weapon, the suspension of disbelief disappears. It disappears completely. Because it's not normal for a human being to not find a way to arm themselves. Do not ever make the excuse of no weapons, more scary. Or excuse. I need to go back to my... Okay, I don't have... I think my stream went well right now, so I think I'm going to record that video.